When I was a teenager, there was this whole thing of like metrosexual men, right? And how fancy. I remember one kid, this boy, came to school in a G-string, right, and was showing it off to all the homies, right? I wonder.
For me, it's also about like, come to school in a G-string. That's you, but why are you showing it to all the homies? You know?
Yeah, come on, man. In school, when you're wearing Nikes, you show them off. When you're wearing a G-string, you show it off.
When was the last time? How many times in school did you show homies like what? Michael Jackson went from black to being white.
Wasn't that vitiligo? That was vitiligo. It was sick.
Was that not plastic surgery?
No, plastic surgery was the nose.
Was it vitiligo?
And I think Michael Jackson, MJ had vitiligo.
No, it was not plastic surgery.
He had vitiligo.
Okay, we have to research this, bro. Like all my life, I've been thinking about this.
Let's look it up.
There are children who are making that decision, and there are doctors in Australia who have been given the mandate that if a child says they want to transition, they have to start the transition.
Yeah, see, that's why they have kangaroos. They deserve the.
Africans on Africa. Let's go.
Africans on Africa, episode 4. I'm really excited to be doing this in person with Thabiso today, and also really excited with the engagement that we have seen so far on the podcast. We have people from different countries talking about the topics that we are talking about, but also actively engaging in the topics, so much so that we have had to think about these topics. In terms of, I think one of the things that we have to do is on episode 10, we're going to invite you guys to talk about these conversations and open them up, and also ask questions, because I think some of these conversations are not even comment-only questions. It's topics that we have to open up. Maybe we can do a live thing when we get to episode 10. But if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel, like, and most importantly, please engage in the conversation. I did an amazing episode last week with Ghana. She is a Jamaican artist, and I loved our interaction and the conversation that we had in starting the aspect of unsafe homes, thinking of migration, thinking of Africans and asking the questions, who is safe in their homes, but also thinking of the questions of what makes a home unsafe, and it's Pride Month this month. In thinking of what we're going to talk about today, I think I want to talk about 3 things, right? And these 3 things, sexuality within Africa. Also want to talk about sexual discrimination, and we also want to talk about sexual identity, right? So my departure point is to provoke some thought, but also want to provoke some thought to you, and starting with sexuality. And I'm gonna go out on a whim and propose my theory here with regards to sexuality, and my theory being sexuality, which is sexual practices within Africa, right, is governed by men, and it is sanctioned by women.
Ivan has all these theories and ideas and rants in his head, and then I'm like the punching bag to test them out. Let's. What do you mean sanctioned by women?
Off the bat, what do you think? Off the bat,
I'm like thinking about sanctioned by women, governed by. You said governed.
Governed by men.
By men, sanctioned by women. I don't know. It sounds like there's like a secret group, like Illuminati vibe of some old African aunts and uncles who are telling everybody how to and not to behave.
Weirdly, it's almost like that. So this is my thinking. Quite controversial, I know, but I'm just gonna go out on the whim and talk about it. There is a secret group that norms sexuality, right? But the rules of sexuality are made to please a certain group.
The rules of sexuality, what does that mean?
Sexuality or sexual practice. So what I mean is that, at least in the cultures that I've experienced, right, women are taught sexual practices for the benefit of the men. But within that circle, women are not only taught or socialized for sexual practices, but they are also taught what is wrong and what is right in terms of sexual practices. Which, in a sense, when someone is married, now defines what they can do and they cannot do sexually.
So like girls or young women get readied and practice and taught like how prepared for wifely duties
for the pleasure of men. But now the difference is that for men, it's done to please men, but men don't go through the same practice. It's almost like boys will be boys, right? But they govern it in a sense that I've heard people talk about this issue where if a woman does something sexually and a man can go out and say, where do you learn that from? It's almost as if she knows how to do something sexually, she has learned it somewhere, right? But I'll give an example of my theory, then we can kick it off from there.
It's a bunch of unskilled dudes who are like, where did you learn that?
Exactly. And also they feel like,
anyway, sorry.
Projection match. But what I'm talking about also departs from, I know in Zimbabwe and in Malawi, you can tell me if it's also the same in your culture. Women, specifically as they enter teenagehood and also before they get married, they literally get taken to sex school, so to speak, right? But as guys, we never have that. In this sex school, they have practices that are intense. Some of them are, I know in Zimbabwe, they are told to pull their labia for the pleasure of the man. But I also know in the Malawian culture, they are taught to sexually be active.
Hey, what does that mean?
They go to a school called Chinamwari. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But at that school, they are taught like how to move their body, how to treat a man, how to please a man, in a sense, how to keep a man.
Yeah. I think vendor girls do some sort of initiation like that, where they have all of these dances that they teach them and then that are directly translatable to sexual performance. At least there's one lady told me that. And it's again like getting ready for womanhood. But now that you mention it, I'm also remembering that there used to be a practice among South African Amaxhosa people where they taught, like, I think teenage kids to perform something called, was it ukchoma? I forgot the right word, but it's basically thigh sex.
Yeah.
Right, in preparation for the time when you can actually have penetrative sex. Yeah, it's funny, as much as we think like African cultures are so conservative, Kanti, people are training for bedroom duties, bro.
Before we proceed with that conversation, I just wanted to take a moment to give a shout out to InSurvey, who are the sponsors of this episode. At Africans on Africa podcast, we pride ourselves in providing you with insight that is immersed in research and a data-driven approach. To enable us to do this, survey tools that are provided by InSurvey allow us to design a research process, maximize on the participation of the audience that we want to reach, and be able to extract and extrapolate data from our reports that respond the most effectively to the objectives that we have. If you, your HR team, or your organization want to get to know your customers better, want to get to know your audience better, or your employees better, reach out to InSurvey so that they can start the process of leading you through the process of designing a survey, designing a research project, and understanding your audience better. In addition to this, InSurvey will also build recommendations for you that are actionable and lead you to build action plans that are tangible and practical for your organization or for your market. Exactly. And if you think of it, if we think of how circumcision is also looked at in Africa, another theory that I'm dropping here that's intense is that for most men in Africa, it's practiced for sexual virility, but for women, it's practiced to almost tame their sexual virility, right? But where I'm taking this, I know it's just two guys having this conversation, and already we have already beaten ourselves for that. But where I'm taking this, right, is these norms now dictate what people can do sexually and cannot do sexually, but also it determines sexual practices that can be discriminated against and cannot be discriminated against. So it's almost like a law, but this law is almost governed by what pleases men within a society. And that's what I think about it. Before we even move to sexual discrimination and sexual identity. And
so do you think that's like something that used to happen or something that's like currently happening?
Currently happening. It's an active practice, and it's an active norming, because one of the things that we take for granted is how much rooted these practices are. And when we think they are gone, they are still there.
Yeah. I don't get it, man. So, governed by men, sanctioned by women. What's the sanctioning that women are doing? And which are we talking about? Those aunts that I...
Yes, I'm talking about the aunts that you referred to. So they are normed in terms of this, right? That's how you see, like in some African cultures, when there's a problem in the marriage, they take the girl and they teach the girl, because they create the norms, and within those norms, they validate what is good practice and what is not good practice. But also, a controversial statement by an author called Buchi Emichita, he went as far as saying women are their own enemies when it comes to their own emancipation.
If you ask Twitter, they'll agree with you.
Right? And what that means for me in that regard is those practices are done and sanctioned by mothers teaching their children, aunties teaching their nieces, and mothers not teaching their boys, or fathers not teaching their boys, and aunties not teaching their nephews and uncles not, it's almost like boys will be boys. And for me, that sets the tone for any sexual discrimination that we see.
Oh, that's like the foundation.
Where I'm taking this is, why is there so much discrimination for same-sex relationship in Africa? Discuss.
Well, I mean, historically, same-sex relationships have been present across the continent, right? There've been cultures where if a woman becomes infertile, she can't have children. No, I'm wrong. If the dude dies or something, the lady will get another woman into her household to help her raise the existing children that she has. Right? I need to remember this, but there was an anthropological study about it. I think is it Kenya? Please help me, Kenyans. Plus the Kenyans watch, yeah? Hey, don't slap me, help me. When you ask me that, the first thing that comes to my mind, right, is South Africa. And I keep saying, but no one wants to figure it out and clarify. But Shaka Zulu was definitely gay. Come on, guys.
Quote Thabiso on this, don't.
If not gay, then bi. Right?
But there has been historical evidence that has shown specifically that some kings within the African continent have actually practiced same-sex relationships.
Yeah.
And it's not a new concept, right? But what has become a new concept is that we are talking about it now. Because we don't talk about those things in Africa. It's things that you don't talk about. It's taboo and it's left like that.
But also, I think part of it is within the discourse. Before the Zulu people come after me, within the discourse, there's a whole thing about I remember there was, is it gay? Is it homosexual? Or is it men who have sex with men? MSM, right? And one of the classic studies of that is dudes in prison, who would end up being classified as men who have sex with men, right? They're not gay. It's just men who have sex with men. I can't, in my head, if you take a regular dude from the street and try to explain that, you're like, well, what do you mean, bro? That sounds gay, right? What are you talking about, right? And so there's the whole thing of no, it's not just about sex, right?
It's also centered within masculinity in Africa, where we have seen that being called either a woman or being called gay is so attached with so many negative connotations of weakness that people don't want to be called those names, But so it's not even. It also departs from the sexual practices, and it's not even attached to the sexual practices.
Then we get to a conversation about power, right? And that's the prison case study, right? Those sexual encounters. You think about it, a lot of it has to do with power dynamics, in a similar way that sexual abuse has to do with power dynamics, right? The other case study, there was this Dunbar Moody did a study on men who used to work in the mines of South Africa back in the day when the mines were migrant labor was huge in the mining industry. And a lot of these men would if you're a foreman, been in the mine for 8 years or whatever, when the new guys come in, you pick your wife. Yeah. Right. And that guy that the young boy, I say young boy, like 18, 19, is going to play the role of like wifely duties for you while you guys are all at the mine, right? And Tumba Madi did a real breakdown of that. And his argument, if I remember correctly, was that this is not about like homosexuality, right?
Yeah.
This is about power. This is about like reifying masculine identity within a context where there are no women.
So you see how the governance works for me, because it's almost as if the power dynamics through projection or through the conversation where people are trying to protect whatever sense of masculinity they have, they don't want to be associated with any practices that taint that masculinity, because masculinity is already tainted in a lot of cases. I am centrist when it comes to masculinity. I believe masculinity can be toxic, but also it can be positive.
Well, I mean, masculinity, femininity, all of it can be toxic, right?
That's the point.
It's like sometimes I listen to people talking on TikTok or Twitter or whatever, and I'm like, I hear all of that. Like, you guys are analyzing everything, whatever, which is great. But also, at the end of the day, we're dealing with people. We're talking about people. An asshole is an asshole.
But, bruh, I was thinking about the same thought, and I was thinking to myself, like, it's the same thing, even if you call yourself left, right? And if you're on the left, and then you say, for example, you support wokeness, right? And if you think about it, for me, sometimes wokeness is lazy. And why it's lazy is because why did wokeness have to exist where there is consciousness? But also within that regard, why it's also lazy, because it's also like easy just to cancel a person and not have a discussion about this is what a person does. I believe there are behaviors that are outright messed up.
Did you see someone called you a liberal in the comments?
Yes. And I'm like, thank you. Right? So that's how I take it. It's almost as if we have to be cautious with just being left or just being right. But also, we have to be really cautious and find ways to think about, like what you're saying, masculinity and femininity, all of them can be toxified in a sense, but it also makes it easy to accept something and not really think about it, right? For example, it's easy to say, it's easy to dismiss the polygamy debate, for example, right? And just say polygamy is just bad. But you don't think about it, right? Yeah. But once we call it polyamorous relationship, then it's like, oh, it's good. But also, if we go deeper with that, in terms of that aspect, I feel as if if we don't think about those things, then we tend to just take things in and not really think about them and digest them, which is for me, it's quite healthy. It's quite healthy to think about things and digest them.
Well, speaking of that, I want to pull you back a little bit. So your thesis about sexuality being governed by men and sanctioned by women, right? That's the thesis. And so you were saying with the foundation for sexual discrimination. What's the connect there?
Right. So this is the connect, right? And I'll show you a video soon, right? Mm-hmm. The connect is this. It is the foundation for behavior that is stated to be normalized, and behavior that is stated to be abnormalized, right? And I'll tell you, one of the weakest arguments that I've ever heard in my life was someone justifying something based on culture.
Oh, like it's my culture. Vervoerd would love that when people identify the whole being by their culture.
But identifying yourself with your culture is very valuable, right? And people would ask, why do I even say such a thing, right? I think if you say something and you justify it based on your culture, then you don't have an understanding of it enough to have the conviction within yourself to say, this is why I'm doing this.
Oh, sorry, I digress a little bit. Yeah. That sounds similar to like when people say the Bible or God said. And then it's the end of the argument, right?
Exactly, even with religion, right? I can tell you something. We have totems in Zimbabwe, right? And we grew up being told that we don't eat our totems.
Oh.
Right? So my totem is the heart.
Oh.
And I grew up not eating the heart. right? But the meaning on
Wait. Like which heart?
any heart.
Any heart.
So
Okay.
if people cook chicken heart,
Oh, those chicken hearts are amazing, bro.
right? So, but the why is very important. I give you another example where if someone says, I am polygamist, and then you're like, oh, why are you polygamist? I'm not against polygamy, and then they say, because it's my culture. I'm like,
Yeah.
do you understand?
But is it a weak argument or is it just boring to you? Because for me, it's boring. That's what it is.
Because you don't have an understanding of why you are doing it, or you have a defense of why you're doing it. You know, if you want to have many women, then just justify it on having many women, or justify it on
many men
aspects, or many men. Don't justify it on the basis of culture.
What is it when it's many men? It's polygyny. Polygyny. There's polygamy and polygyny.
Then there's polyandry as well.
Polyandry and polyamory.
Okay, help us with the point. Polyamorous is just having
That's relationships, right? Yeah. Anyway.
Right? So I'm gonna show you this video. And this video is gonna speak to what I'm talking about. Right?
Okay, let's see.
So let's play this video. And I'll give context.
It's on Twitter.
Yes, it's on Twitter. Okay.
What's can I read the caption?
Yeah.
I can say with certainty this is a stage demo by gays who are members of the GALZ, G-A-L-Z, itself as a fundraising means to show the West that LGBTQ plus are suppressed in Zimbabwe or threatened as a means to raise more funds for themselves, nothing more. Look at the tweaker and say I lie. What's going on over here?
Okay, so this is what's happening. It's an anti-same-sex relationship protest in Zimbabwe, right? These people, the man, right? I say that intentionally. The man who is leading the protest literally said that men who sleep with other men who are in relationships with other men should leave the country.
That dude is dancing like that.
Dude, right? Which gets to my other theory, which is like, so Zimbabwe is going through a lot, right? And then you wake up and then you say, oh, today I'm going to protest, right? In protesting, I'm going to protest because people are sleeping with people that they want to sleep with. And I'm going to protest because of, I'm going to protest for women sleeping with the people that they want to sleep with, right? And for me, it's like, why does it bother you so much? Why does it make you lose sleep and you...
Bruh, you got time. Hey, you got time, huh?
And are we even going to talk about projection much?
Yeah, that dude.
Right? So that's where the discrimination stems for me. It's like, maybe based on cultural practices or something, but for me, it's thinking, why does it make you lose sleep so much?
Yeah, it's like, why are you bothered? I never could figure out why you'd be bothered. But when I think about it, I'm trying to think of something that bothers me that shouldn't bother, or that I've got no business being bothered by. But would you have an example of that? Like something that bothers you that really shouldn't bother you? Because I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who wakes up to commit time to a protest like that. Yeah, this person must be really bothered, man. And I can't figure out like why you bothered to that extent.
So for me, as much as it is multi-layered, what I know is the impacts of this, right? So 7.5 million Africans approximately are leaving their homes to go to find another home because they are they are in same-sex relationships. Apart from that, only one African country is considered as safe to travel for people within the LGBTQ community.
Which one is that? South Africa?
Yes.
Really?
But also, discrimination practices are only protected in 8 African countries. So, for the 7.5 million people who do not have anywhere to go, so to speak, or who do not have a home, so to speak, they have a higher chance of landing in a country where discrimination practices are not protected. And we cannot have this conversation.
Yeah, I knew a dude from Uganda who couldn't go back home because his family was, he and his relationship with his father was dead. He got disowned, basically. I can't imagine what that's like, but I'm thinking of what you're saying, like the implication of such is what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes. So it's the shunning away that you're talking about. For me, it's the fact that it's considered so taboo that we cannot even just talk about it. And you ask why. You can't even ask why, right? And the response that you get if you open up the conversation is like, I know a lot of people are going to point at me and say, are you gay? Right? And that's how we resolve that.
You are gay.
That's another one, right? Why are you gay? Yeah. Right? And for me, that's the sexual discrimination that happens. But also it starts from a point where sexual discrimination is not even on a level of same-sex relationships only. It's also not even letting people be able to express themselves sexually.
I want to take you back to the thesis. So, and you're saying this is the result of that governance and sanctioning that you talked about.
That's how I think about
by
it.
The uncles and the aunts. Yeah. So then what should happen? Are we going to wait out the uncles and the aunts?
And I think that's where the conversation goes to say what should happen. For me, what should happen is the uncles and aunts should have conversations on both sides. I think if people are going to be socialized into sexual relationships, which also sounds a bit weird, conversations need to happen on both sides. But also people need to have these conversations because I know a lot of people specifically who do not talk about these things, right? But we have had a lot of cases where someone in a family comes out of the closet, and it's like this rejection that is there in Zimbabwe, that Zimbabwe doesn't have homosexuality. And that makes it real.
So you know me, I just love seeing like human behavior and how complex it is, right? And how people contradict themselves, but everything I read or observe, for me, it all boils down to how people think is complex, but how people make choices is usually pretty simple. Right? A lot of it is there's this phrase, homo economicus, like how will I benefit, right? Or how do I secure myself? How do I keep myself safe? Self-preservation, right? It's all about preserving yourself, right? Evolutionary. So anyway, so I'm thinking of what you're talking about, and I'm thinking like, you say both sides, they must come, they must talk, right? And talk it out, and that's what should happen.
Not talk it out, but there should be an openness to socialization that is not only reserved for girls, but also for boys. But also, if people should express themselves sexually, then it should be open to everyone, which I think ideally should be the case.
The reason I'm prefacing this by saying talking about how people make decisions, and you're Zimbabwean. There was a point where in families, and I think we referred to this in a previous episode.
Yeah.
If you were supporting MDC and half of the family are supporting ZANU PF, you guys couldn't have a discussion about politics at the dinner table. You talk about everything but that. Am I right?
I think it depends with the family. In our family, right, we used to support different we used to have different political affiliations. Are we in trouble? But we used to, we would talk about it. But the sexuality conversation now
Oh, so that's like another level there.
It's another level.
That's what I'm trying to make sense of. Like, because it fundamentally boils down to what's taboo to talk about.
If we had the conversation, I think recently we had the conversation, but if we had the conversation growing up, it was just in a dismissive nature to say, no, this won't happen. It was almost like the politics of belonging, which this guy in the video is actively doing, where he's creating, Yuval Davis calls this active boundary maintenance, to say you belong there or you do not belong in Zimbabwe because you are gay, right? And it's almost cultivated there within the family, where it's almost as if you don't talk about it, but if you talk about it, we're just making sure that we are shaming this behavior or shaming this.
That happened to my Sunday school teacher. I had a Sunday school Sunday school cheater. No, Sunday school teacher. And the dude, he was just a Sunday school teacher, whatever, right? And then later I realized, like, once, we grown up, realized, that man was gay, right? But the whole time he was our teacher, even our parents would never say anything about it. But now that we've grown up, it started coming up. Because also, I guess he also, like, got like newfound freedom as well. If I remember correctly, he'd like sort of moved away from the church, but it was the shaming. When my friends' parents, like people in the church would talk about him, it was precisely that, like, how did he do to our children, kind of thing, and so it boils down, and we had this conversation. Check out the previous second episode about belonging. Like, who gets to belong? Like, which sexualities get to belong? Like in Africa, in our homes, in our churches, etc., etc. So I think, I don't know, man. I'm still struggling with, like,
and the power of that othering means that homes become unsafe, and this is why we are talking about this issue of unsafe homes. Because if it's just shaming, right? Then if someone within that home has wants to come out, so to speak, right, they cannot come out because it's not a safe space, or they come out and, like what you said, they're ostracized. So that's the reality of what I'm talking about here in terms of that, those discriminatory practices. And in some cases it goes as far as people killing each other or raping people, Yeah, that I don't know if it's still a big thing, but once upon a time that was a big thing in South Africa, like raping people to be straight. Like, imagine. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and I'm sure people have. So I'm sure a lot of people watching have come from communities that have engaged in that or that have perpetrated. But how did we get to a point where rape is corrective?
Yeah.
Like, is it at that point?
Is it that power thing again?
It is the power thing, but at that point, I don't even care what someone is being punished for. How is rape corrective? Yeah. I know it's also about asserting one's power on a person and showing them that this is the way life should be done. But how is rape corrective for someone who just has feelings for another person?
Yeah. So it's that question you're talking about earlier. Hey, what are the things that lead you to be that level of bothered? And I suppose maybe the cultural context. I mean, when I made that comment about Shagazulu, trust me, there's a lot of pissed off people. I
want to distance myself. but it is that. But also, we haven't even spoken about another layer of this complexity, right? Which we have been evading in a lot of episodes. And I don't know, we might need... we're going to have an episode about this, actually. Religion. Oh, yeah. Right? And we're going to have an episode on it we're going to find men of God. So if you're a man of God, or if you are in a church and you want to talk to us about the church practices, then we also... Because it has a lot of implications for Africans, but also the way that Africans also conduct themselves. Because some people justify these acts or this discrimination based off of religion.
Do you think like these TV shows and these celebrities who identify as LGBTQ and these storylines and TV shows that are like LGBTQ storylines, and do you think like they have an impact on the social barometer? Like for example, like
That's a good question.
yeah, I'm thinking about Somizi, right? Old school gay dude, right? And I'm thinking about older people. By older, I mean like your 50s, 60s, right? Who are like in churches, pretty conservative, right? But freaking love Somizi. Yeah, these are the aunts, by the way, right? Freaking love Somizi and how flamboyant he is and the way he speaks and how entertaining he is and his charisma, all of that, right?
I've seen men of God who condemn same-sex relationships, but they are in company with Somizi and they are affiliated with Somizi, and they are also, which is a good thing. But also the contradiction is loud.
I mean, he did walk out of a church once because the pastor who was there was saying some crap about the gay people not being welcome in church, something like that, right?
Do you see how we need a whole episode for religion?
So, yeah, definitely. So I'm saying, but do you think that sort of like portrayal that's happening on say TV, radio, whatever it might be, social media, do you think it's helping? I mean, I'm talking about people who would use the derogatory term, stabani, right? And now they're like following your Somizi or whoever it might be, and his marriage, blah, blah, and getting entertained by it. I don't know. Is there a social barometer shift there?
I think there's always a problem with progressiveness in any problem that we have seen in history or discriminatory problem that we see, right? Because the smaller circles are what I'm concerned about. What I mean is, if you look at racism, for example, people claim to be progressive with racism, but what has happened now is racism has transformed from being overt to be subtle. So people hide their racism, but within their circles, we've seen WhatsApp groups that still have racial connotations and they still have racial slurs, and they protect each other within those circles. So I think the same thing is happening. It's like this thing that companies say we have Pride Month, but within the circles, the smaller circles of the company, they are not really practicing good practices for inclusion. So that's why I have a problem with the aspect of progressiveness and wokeness, which is not done in a conscious way. What is your theory on gender identity?
My theory on gender identity.
What is your thinking around gender identity?
I think gender is fluid. Look, as a human being, or us as people, human beings are multifaceted. There's no like singular way of being, right? And that's why, to go back to what you were saying about being liberal or conservative, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. Like Chris Rock once said, I'm liberal about some things, conservative about some things. Yeah. I think his example was sex work, I'm liberal. Right? And I think gender is fluid. And I say so because it doesn't make sense for me to say I'm a man or I'm a woman and this is the box. These are all the things that I can perform as a man or as a woman. These are all the things that I can't perform as a man, as a woman, because culture by its nature is adaptive. It's constantly adapting, constantly changing, right? And those gender roles that come with being a man or a woman change as well over time. It's not so long ago, women are supposed to, stay in the kitchen. What? And so, based on like such behavioral shifts that we've seen in human history, really, gender cannot be binary. And that's my take on it. That's my take on it. When I was a teenager, there was this whole thing of like metrosexual men, right? And how fancy. I remember one kid, this boy, came to school in a G-string, right? And was showing it off to all the homies. right? I wonder why.
For me, it's also about like, come to school in a G-string. That's you. But why are you showing it to all the homies, you know?
Yeah, come on, man. It's school. When you're wearing Nikes, you show them off. When you're wearing
No!
a G-string, you show it off.
When was the last how many times in school did you show homies like,
Anyway, so that's my whole thing. It's because had he stuck to, I'm a guy, this is the box, you would never have been interested in men's G-strings because they do not fit that box of man, right? And that whole metrosexual thing movement would not have been a thing, right? And what I'm loving now that I'm seeing more and more of is like dudes with great nails, right? And like dudes with manicure and all of that. I thought it was like just a few of us who were making sure our nails are nice, yeah. And it's a small thing when you think about it. It's a small thing, but I think it's a monumental shift when you start seeing it in places that you never expected to see such behavior, right? Places where you hear all of these slurs, right, all the time, and suddenly those dudes are doing their nails, and so again, it can't be binary, man. It really can't. That doesn't make sense at all. That's my take on it.
No, I agree. But my take is quite a bit controversial, but it also comes from a departure point of, I think, gender is fluid, but gender has been woked as well.
Woked.
I'm not attacking woke, but I think there's something that has happened with wokeness, right? When I say gender has been woked, it has been explained as fluid, but without the intentionality to make people understand what that means. And I know off the bat, people will say, it's not my business to explain this to you. I had that conversation with Ghana as well, right? But I think we live as a community and we live as people, right? Especially when there is now the transitional space where members of society are expected to comply to pronouns.
Yeah, it's like you don't expect me. You can't expect me to be nice and then not educate me on niceness kind of thing. Okay, I get you.
Because for me, I'll be honest. I'll be the first one to accept that at some levels, I get lost in the conversation. Yeah. At some levels, I lack understanding. Yeah. Right. At various levels, I'm like, okay, I'm following, but I get lost.
Can I play before we get to your dodgy point of view on it? I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. I get it when people say it's not my job to educate you, because sometimes people are just tired, bruv. I think of like racism and the experiences that I've had and probably you've had. Like at some point you're like, man, I can't keep doing this with these white people, right? They should do the job of learning and studying, blah, blah, right? But then we got the community thing that you're talking about.
But also, doesn't that promote ignorance? Because a person doesn't know. And I understand, especially with the racial aspect. Yeah. And me, I'm a person who wants to ask. Yeah. I really genuinely want to know.
So you and I have a mutual friend. And his take on this, I remember he once said, is like, I don't know, man. I don't care about most of you guys anyway, right? And now you're asking me to go educate myself, blah, blah. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care if, you hate me, whatever.
And, maybe we should talk about this as well, Thabiso. We actually tried to invite someone, right?
Oh, yes. Right? Oh, yes. That went down well.
And the response that we got was we should leave the whole trans community alone.
Yeah, that was weird. That was really weird.
Right? So for me, it's like...
Oh, no. They said... I shared the little, explanation of what we're trying to do. And the response was, that is so basic. Leave the trans community alone, whatever. And Ivan and I were talking about it, and I think you said that's egotistical. something like that, right? And it's this conversation of like, well, it might be basic to you guys, but here's Ivan who says sometimes he gets lost in the conversation, right? And you can't expect him to come across you in the middle of the street and get it.
Because now there's an expectation that I must understand the pronouns and how to ask which pronouns I should address you with. But also the act of addressing you with the desired pronouns is on my part, whereas I must not be educated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a tricky one here. But I'm also saying, like, to get a response like that from someone, the response that we got trying to invite someone, I'm imagining that they've done like podcasts and whatnot and interviews and they're like just tired, they're just tired of explaining themselves and explaining life and how they are entitled to the basic rights. But
that's a conversation that I'll have. That's a conversation that I'll have. If someone tells me that they're tired, I know the experiences of someone tire people sometimes, but there's no one who's, that's why we are also having this podcast. I think I've said this line in all the episodes that we have had, because Africans are so misunderstood and misinterpreted, and their stories are written by other people, that we are like, we want to talk about our experiences, to educate people. I love the comment that we had the last time when someone said, they had an introspective comment of saying, this is what I realized about my own self. This is an African talking about their own experience, So there is so much learning and unraveling of experiences to do when we have this conversation.
Bro, you can't know everything.
Thank you.
You can't know everything. And even I think about myself, like I've got quite a history of being hotep back in my early 20s, back in my university days, and every woman was my queen, sister, and hey, and reading on Tutankhamen and all of those guys, blah blah blah. Like growing from that to something that's more like, all right, I don't know everything. Let me hear what you got to say. Let me observe. Maybe I could learn something from you. It's very different, because once you get to a point where we have this, we know this, we are this community, whatever it might be. This is us, and you're gonna accept us as we are, regardless of what you don't like, blah blah. Now we're not engaging in a conversation, right? Now you're speaking down to me.
But also you are doing that, the politics of belonging, where you are creating an other and you're making yourself inaccessible to the whole community, and you have expectations. So I think it's weird, because I started this episode with a theory, and now I'm like, I don't know, which is the point. Like, some of these things I honestly do not know. But
you see where the gender fluidity thing works for me? It's those gray areas, right? Nothing is ever binary in the world. At least that's my take, right? Yeah, my ex didn't like it when I said that. Like, nothing is ever binary. And these gray areas are where I think we come together to get each other, right? Because fundamentally, I like what you said. Community. We live in communities. This thing of I don't owe anyone anything. It's crap. You owe people accountability. You owe people decency, at the very least, because we live in a community, right?
But for me, another thing that's loud is how gender is fluid, but we are supposed to know everything and how it works. Because if it's fluid, there are so many unknowns.
Yeah, by the nature of fluidity. yeah. No,
which is my point.
But at the same time, it's a tough one, because you could take our mutual friends' point of view of, it's fluid, there's too much going, anyway, I don't care. You could be inclined to take that position, right? Which doesn't help anyone.
Which is also like, if I'm living life, I'm doing me, I can choose to do that. I'm just doing me. The rest of you, I don't care. And I'll completely understand. But where it gets grayer and controversial for me is where the world is now headed, right? Where technology has intervened in practically great ways as well, and we've seen gender transformations, right? And surgeries enabling that. Discuss.
I don't know, bro. I want to talk a little bit about, so I used to a lifetime ago. I used to teach a course, second year course, on social anthropology on sexuality and gender, right? And there's a lady in the UK who did a documentary about labiaplasty, right? I think that's the phrase. That's the word. Yeah, labiaplasty is like these girls and young women in the UK. There was a small trend of like porn star vaginas, and they would get their labia chopped off, right, to look like, yeah, that one. And so this lady did a documentary looking at this behavior and what's informing it, right? And my take on it was, this is interesting because so many of the other studies just focus on black and brown people, black and brown women and their experiences and female genital mutilation. Well, now you got these women who are making this choice, and these are white women, right? I actually played the documentary in the class, and this French exchange student, she fainted. I was like, about like 25 minutes. You okay? Yeah, it's different when it's white vaginas, right? Because I mean, we'd been seeing all this other stuff, right? But anyway, my point was, what was my point? What were you asking again?
I was talking about the fact that we are fluid, but nobody really cares.
Oh, yes.
Gender transformation.
Yes. So my point was the surgeries and all that. Would you say is like the progress that we made, etc. I think while these technological shifts are happening, maybe culturally we're not keeping up. Right? Like I said earlier, culture adapts, and it's the nature of culture. But maybe we are not keeping up, right? And part of the result of all of that is people going, you can't do that, right? You can't become a man. You can't become a woman. We haven't caught up, but the tech is there. If you want to go, or not tech, medical advancements are there.
But it's also a conversation that we've always had. But I think the lack of understanding just becomes loud, you know? Michael Jackson went from black to being white.
Wasn't that vitiligo? That was vitiligo. He was sick.
Was that not plastic surgery?
No, plastic surgery was the nose.
Was it vitiligo?
And I think Michael Jackson, MJ had vitiligo.
No, it was not plastic surgery.
He had vitiligo.
Okay, we have to research this, bro. Like all my life, I've been thinking about this.
Let's look it up.
But it's a conversation that I've always been thinking about in terms of it has not only started there, right? Yeah. Just say plastic surgery. Let's see.
I want to say vitiligo. I'm telling you, was diagnosed with vitiligo in 1984. And tried to hide the white patches on his skin with makeup, surgery, and a glove.
What surgery?
I don't know, but I know about the nose one after the burn.
Okay, but my point was, we're still having those conversations, right? But the depth of it for me is, so we are dealing with two issues here, specifically when we are dealing with sex, right, which is biological, and the transformation, right? And the question for me is, there is an aspect of gender dysphoria.
What is that? I don't know what that is. What is that? I keep hearing about it.
So, in simple terms, gender dysphoria is the anxiety that arises as a result of the gender that is assigned
is
to
that
you
the
and you are.
I feel like I'm in the wrong body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So there can be gender dysphoria that happens in terms of someone feels like they're, especially, I'm going to talk about children, right? But now in some countries, children can now transition, or they can be given medication to transition, which is a conversation that I had with Ghana as well. At what age should it happen, or if it should happen?
I don't know, bro, but I know when I'm a pretty short guy, right? I'm what is it in American? 5'5", and when I was younger, as a teenager, I learned about HGH, human growth hormone. I think is what it is. The Lionel Messi thing.
Yeah.
Right? And I was inclined to want that. Matter of fact, if I had the guts, I would have, and we had the money at home, I would have asked for that. Right? Yeah. I'm all grown now. I don't care anymore. You know what I mean? I've learned a lot, and it doesn't bother me, and all of that. So, no, I know I'm not answering your question.
No, but you just did. in a sense. Continue.
What I'm trying to say is, I was a kid. If it were up to me, I would have freaking done that. Dude, I found out like there was this surgery they do to make people taller. You heard about that? Like they take the shin and
then they extend.
They separate the bone and then it grows, adding some centimeters in between when it's healing.
Yeah.
Some crap like that, right?
I think that's what I'm trying to get at, right? And I think one of the things that scares me, right? This controversial thing that I'm gonna say, but one of the things that scares me is that parents are not parenting anymore. The role of a parent is to be able to give guidance, but also, I'm not saying parents are always correct, right? But be able to parent, and a child should be a child within that age.
Yeah, I don't know if I can talk about that because I also think people should stop having kids anyway. But I need coffee.
I think it's actually better if people stop having kids with what's happening because now with what's happening, right? A child can transition, but you haven't gone through adolescence where you are conflicted with your identity and you're conflicted with everything about life. If you do it after that, I think do you. But I think it gets controversial when, at least for me, when a 5-year-old gets to say, I need to start transitioning.
Okay, but 5 sounds extreme. I don't think that's happening.
Thabiso.
Is it really 5?
5, 7.
Jeez, that sounds like some American decision making. But why is that the line when it's like kids transitioning, when parents are already dictating what kids are gonna become, as you know, what they're gonna do for a living, their careers already at 5, parents are dictating that. Why is this one?
I think there are 2 extremes. I didn't say parents should dictate the sex or the gender of the child, right? I'm not for dictating that, but I'm saying if a child is to make that decision, the parent still needs to parent, and the child still needs to be a child.
So what is the parent parenting in that instance?
Read about it, go forward in terms of having more information about it and guiding the child, even if it means leading to guiding them to the transition. But it's an acknowledged decision. It's a decision that you have made with information.
You think that's not happening?
There are children who are making that decision, and there are doctors in Australia who have been given the mandate that if a child says they want to transition, they have to start the transition.
Yeah, see, that's why they have kangaroos. They deserve the. I didn't know that about Australia.
Go read on it, bro. Like, it's a thing that's happening. And I think essentially, right, what I'm getting at and what I'm finding out, specifically when you bring it back to Africa, is how norms and socialization still drives the way that we think. But we are not reaching a point where we have to think about these things and question. God forbid we question our culture. Not God forbid. Forbid we question our culture. You know, how dare we question any taboos, but also things that are positive. We are not even questioning them. A lot of people know their totems, like I said. A lot of people know their surnames. A lot of people know their origins, but they don't question why we do the things that we do. Why are they important?
So did you eat a heart?
I've never knowingly ate a heart. But for me, something that I thought about and also looked on. And so the theory is that if you eat a heart, your teeth will drop, right? But that's not the essence. The essence is the symbolism of the heart for my people. And that symbolism is like, if you have a South African flag on the floor, right, or a map of South Africa, or bad example, or the emblem of Bafana Bafana, if it's on the ground, you can't step on it, right? You can step on it and nothing happens to you, but you can't step on it. So if you have a totem that connects you with your relatives, right, that totem that connects you with your relative, it is something that is a symbol of your whole ethnicity and tribe. And to respect it, you can't take it and then you eat it.
I mean, we must do maybe this discussion at another time, but the significance of the symbols, cultural symbols, right, and the weight they have. I don't know if you ever heard about this, but there used to be an ad for some beer brand, right? And the ad had a guy going, "When I win both," right? In Isuzu, and it was like these dudes who wanted to marry the king's daughter, blah blah. Actually, the Zulu Nation had a huge issue with it. I think it was eventually it was taken down, but it's because of that. You can't just address anybody as "When I win both" except the king, right? And so it became a whole thing. But it's that weight, the symbolism, the cultural aspect, and I think we can respect that while also question everything, right? And also saying your cultural, it's my culture, is not the end all and be all.
It's not the end all, and that's why I'm saying it also shows a lack of understanding and engagement with your own culture. Because if you have engaged with your own culture, you know why things are done, but also you can pass it on with wisdom. If you tell your child that we are Legodis and we don't eat the heart, as an example, right? If you can't tell them the why, they won't preserve it and they won't carry it forward.
Yeah. No, I get you.
Which gets to my main point, right? And my main point being, we need to continue socializing each other, but on a grander scheme of things.
You know, you just reminded me talking about families. I got a cousin. I've got a cousin who's definitely gay, right? But he hasn't come out of the closet. It's none of my business, really. But sometimes I think about him. My sister and I will talk about him, and like, man, I wish he felt safe around us, around the family, you know. And it's the things you were talking about, like unspoken, and obviously he doesn't feel safe. Or at least I think it's obvious me. But I would hope that he'd feel safe and comfortable to go, hey, this is who I am, right? And this is my life, right? And I didn't choose any to be this person. This is who I am. You guys didn't choose to be who you are. But it takes me to that, like what you were saying, socialization of it. It should be at a point where it shouldn't be a big deal anyway, yeah. But hey, man, our families are our families, and apparently some things are un-African.
If you just outed your cousin.
No, yo. But I have a million cousins.
Family is family, right? And as much as we can't choose family, but it is the beginning process of engagements, right? I think it's the beginning process of questioning things. I've had difficult conversations with my family, and I've opened up questions to conversations that are taboo, you know. And I think that's the socialization that we are talking about. You know, for us to start tagging something an African from lack of understanding, it's just dangerous, but also most of all, it's just confining and traumatizing, and it only risks the lives of the people who are within our space. Like if your cousin, for example. So I think the socialization is
not a cousin.
I mean a neighbor. Sorry, that was my mistake.
No, I'm like, oh my god, did I out?
No, you have a million.
Person.
You have a million cousins.
Yeah, but it's also like it takes me back to that response that we got, right? Stay away from the trans community. It's like this basic conversation. That's the point, right? Like how's Ivan gonna learn? How's he gonna get out of this rut if you think the things he's thinking about are just basic and below you? And
I'd be the first person to say I am for equality and for people to practice their sexuality openly. It could be in same-sex relationship, it could be in hetero relationships, you know. But I would be also the first person to say there are things that I don't understand and there are things that I need to understand.
Yeah. Hey, when you said equality, I was thinking of something else.
So
I think some people should not be allowed to vote if they don't pass a test. That's unrelated.
Yeah. So I think for me that's what it is. I think we are still living in societal norms that drive the way that we interact, but most of all, we have to open ourselves to new ways of thinking, new ways of engaging, and questioning the good and the bad.
Hopefully we get someone in the comment section who says, yo, I'll come join you guys and talk this out.
And we are out there and we are open, right? We want to have those conversations, and we also want to ask the hard questions, and not dismiss these conversations. And yes,
Learn, man.
learn, because just this conversation has shown us that there's a lot that we don't know, and we know we are just two guys having this conversation. So come and have the conversation with us as well. It's something that we're open to.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're a community, right? We're all supposed to get along, or at least step into the other person's shoes, kind of thing. As opposed to just speaking about them and share with them afar and making up conclusions without understanding their lives and decisions, etc. Yeah.
Parting shots.
I'm always like, gender is definitely fluid, and I also think like it can be premature to make these conclusions about how people should live their lives. It's very premature. But I also want to hear from African parents regarding what you were talking about, the whole, at some point you have to have that conversation with your kid, right? How do you guys go about it? Maybe some of you have already done it. And what's it look like in your community? Do you have I've heard guys say, yo, I would never want a gay son. And we can't act like people who think that way live on some other continent, and we also kind of act like they're aliens. We work with them, maybe even friends. I don't know. So how have you dealt with it? How does it play out in your community? Yeah, that's what I'd like to learn.
Mine is just simple. Let's talk, let's learn, let's teach, and let's create safe spaces.
But I also want the people who are like, just live your life. Me, I don't care. Anyway, I don't like you guys anyway. If you happen to be watching, is that working hard? I want to know. Like,
they don't care.
That's why I'm like, if you happen to be watching for some weird reason where you got a little bit of care today.
Nah, but we do care. And that's it from us, Thabiso. Thank you for the show, and thank you for everybody for joining. And Ivan Katsere here.
Dude,
I am
this
an African.
This is my 4th coffee today.
And this is my 3rd coffee, and
I'm feeling
we're still
it
doing
now.
this.
No. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. I'm Thabiso Legodi, and I am an African.